How could I have known that this moment would change my life completely? It was an ordinary day until I walked into that room when I noticed the door was ajar. Something in me shifted in a matter of seconds. I could have turned around, ignored it, but I didn't, because at that instant when I understood what I was seeing, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. And yes, I was the one at fault because I was the one who had done that, the one who had caused this. George was out. The house was quiet, but I heard faint noises coming from upstairs. Leo was in his room. At first, I didn't pay it any mind. Just another moment of a young man lost in his world. But maybe he'd like a coffee. A little chat would be welcome. As I climbed the stairs, I tried to figure out where the noises were coming from. Approaching his room, I noticed the door was slightly open. I took a breath, about to call out to him, but my gaze landed inside. He was sitting on his bed, his laptop on his knees, the bright screen casting a glow on his face. His hands were moving, and at first I thought he was just watching something exciting, maybe an action movie. But taking one more step, changing the angle, the meaning drained from my face. That was the moment I understood exactly what Lau was doing. My eyes met the reflection on the screen, and a cold wave washed over me. I hadn't expected this. I hadn't wanted to see this. Lau fidgeted, trying to compose himself, frantically lowering the volume of his laptop. But it was too late. The moment had already arrived. When our eyes met, his face turned bright red, shame undeniable in his eyes. "Oh, I'm sorry," he stammered, looking away. I froze in place. The door?" I began, but I had no idea what I was trying to say. A strange sensation ran through me. I was embarrassed, of course, but my mind was also buzzing with thoughts I couldn't grasp. I quickly left the room, my heart pounding, hands on my face trying to calm my breathing. "What was that?" I whispered to myself. What had I just done? Why had I been so careless? But was I the only one at fault? "Stop it, Agnes," I told myself sternly. But the chaos inside me was triggered by much more than what I had seen. Leo was 19 now. He was no longer a child, but I was also a woman who had known her share of shame. I had never been in such a situation, but I knew exactly what he was feeling. I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart still beating hard. I ran my fingers through my hair, trying to pull myself together. When Lau appeared in the doorway, he adjusted his collar, cleared his throat, and kept his eyes averted. "Agnes, I'm sorry. I thought I'd close the door," he said in an uncertain but sincere voice. I shook my head vigorously, looking away. No, actually, I'm the one who should apologize. I should have knocked before entering," I said hurriedly, not really knowing what else to say. Silence. But it wasn't just any silence. We had lived in the same house for years, but this was the first time we looked at each other like this. The first time there was such tension between us. "I should go down and start making something for dinner," I said, quickly turning towards the stairs. My voice trembled, but I tried to contain it. Lau said nothing. He watched me as if trying to piece something together in his head. Before the big event happens between Lau and me, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, turn on notifications, and listen to the story until the end. I promise you, everything is going to get really exciting. Until that evening, we didn't speak to each other. No texts, no glances, not even small talk. But that silence whispered that nothing would ever be the same again. At dinner, we sat at the same table, but couldn't look at each other. The only sound was the clinking of cutlery on our plates. We needed to talk to ease the tension. We both knew it. But how? That night passed, then the next day, and the one after that. Everything seemed normal, but nothing really was. Our silence only emphasized the invisible tension between us. It grew even stronger. And then, one afternoon, Lau sat down next to me. I could see the hesitation in his eyes, but it was clear he wanted to fix things. Agnes, about the other day, I'm really, really sorry. I didn't want things to go like that. Please, I don't want this to ruin everything between us, he said in a nervous but sincere voice. I took a deep breath. No matter how strange and unexpected it was, I had to put him at ease. I smiled, shrugged slightly, and said, Leo, believe me, I've had my share of embarrassing moments over the years. Then I told him about one. His smile relaxed a bit and he shook his head, his embarrassment fading slightly. In that instant, it seemed the tension between us had eased, but deep down, I knew nothing was really over. Even if everything seemed better, that conversation hadn't completely erased the tension between us, and things were going to go much further. Lau let out a small laugh, looking down at the table. I guess we're even now, he said softly. I frowned slightly and turned to him. What do you mean? I asked, curiosity piercing my voice. For a second, his expression changed as if I realized he had said something he couldn't take back. He rubbed the back of his neck, hesitating for a moment, but he had already started, and now he had no choice but to continue. He took a deep breath, then looked away, murmuring, I've seen you the same way. You just didn't know it. An electric shock ran through my body. I froze for an instant. What? I murmured, the weight of his words pressing on me. Leo's face was red, but he continued. I never told you. Too embarrassed, but I never forgot. In fact, it was my little secret, something I couldn't get out of my head. My heart was pounding. A strange feeling told me something had changed. Leo's words weren't just a confession. They were breaking down all the barriers between us. I looked at him. He looked at me. And now we both knew this wasn't an ordinary conversation. The atmosphere in the room had thickened. Everything had changed. Since that day, everything changed. There had always been a distance between us, that invisible boundary that separated us. But now that boundary had completely disappeared. Without even realizing it, I had started spending much more time with Lau. Little moments, seemingly insignificant conversations. But in reality, each one only heightened the tension between us. Now we even sat down to watch movies together. Before we always kept our distance, but now there was an unspoken thing between us, something we never talked about. Sometimes when Lau put his arm on the back of the couch, when my hand brushed against his, or when our legs got tangled, something strange happened inside me. But I tried not to think about it. One night I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in my bed, but inner restlessness prevented it. I had only one thing on my mind. Leo, it couldn't go on like this. I had to set boundaries. If he had crossed a line, I had to say it frankly and put an end to it. With those thoughts, I got out of bed. My heart was pounding, but my steps had already led me to Lau's room. His door was ajar, and a faint light dimly illuminated the room. Entering, I saw him. He was sleeping. But at that instant, my eyes weren't just on him. They were fixed on something else, something important. I was breathless for a moment. Seeing him like that triggered a storm inside me. I shouldn't have seen it. I should have turned around immediately, but I didn't. I stayed there for a few seconds, trying to understand what I was feeling. Then I quickly withdrew. There was something in me I couldn't suppress, but I had to ignore it. I went back to my room, lay down, but nothing was the same anymore. That night, I couldn't imagine how complicated things were about to become. Whatever I did, I couldn't resist this growing closeness with Leo. With each passing day, the blurring intensified, and the attraction between us only grew stronger. I hadn't even realized things had gone this far. But one thing was sure, turning back was becoming impossible. And then Leo came home like that. He was drunk. The sound of the door, the objects he knocked over, those noises could have woken George. but I knew it was up to me to deal with it. So I quickly came out of my room and went to see Leo. I didn't even have time to fix my clothes properly before I found myself right next to him. Lo, his gaze was slightly blurry and a faint smile played on his lips. Agnes, are you real? He murmured, the words slurred by alcohol but still sincere. I took a deep breath and grabbed his arm. Leo, come on. You can't stay here like this. We have to be quiet. But Leo's eyes were riveted on my face. He smiled softly, his gaze slowly traveling over me. You know, you're really beautiful. Have you always been like this? Or did I just never notice? I froze for a second, then quickly collected myself. Leo, that's enough. Come to the kitchen. I'll make you some coffee. I slowly led him to the kitchen. I was trying to sober him up a bit, but because of his gaze and his words, something in me was coming undone too. Lau sat on the chair while I made the coffee, but suddenly the cup slipped from his hands and spilled on the— You have to be more careful, I whispered quickly, trying to clean up the mess, but Lau just smiled softly. Have you always been this kind? I quickly cleaned the kitchen. We couldn't stay here any longer. George was sleeping upstairs, but with Lau in this state, we couldn't afford to make more noise. All right, let's go up, but be quiet, I warned, putting my arm around his and guiding him towards the stairs. When we got to his room, his movements were even more unsteady. He needed to change, but he was too out of it to do it alone. At first, I felt like turning away, but when I saw him struggling to take off his t-shirt, I instinctively helped him. As I fumbled with the buttons of his shirt, Lau's breathing slowed. At that instant, the tension between us filled the air. The silence only made it more intense. I knew exactly what I was doing, and yet I had no idea. Lau looked at me differently, and it was one of those moments you can never forget. Leo hesitated as he changed. He let his hands fall to his sides and looked me in the eyes. That's when I realized my breathing had quickened. It was so quiet. The air in the room made even breathing difficult. I'm not playing this game anymore, Agnes, he said, his voice soft at first, then full of certainty. I stared at him without blinking. My heart was beating hard. But what was Leo trying to say? Really? He added, his voice becoming slightly deeper. We ran into each other once and that's it. We don't even think about it. I know it crosses your mind before you sleep. A shiver ran through me, making me take a small step back, but my feet stayed glued to the floor. Leo, this isn't right, I said, but my voice trembled. Leo smiled slightly, but it wasn't an innocent smile. We passed the decision-making stage a long time ago. Agnes, stop lying to yourself. Then he took a step forward, then another. He was so close I could feel his breath on my skin. He raised his hand, his fingers gently falling on my cheek. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't, because deep down I knew he was right. And then Leo, all this silence, all this tension. The answer to everything was hidden in that instant. Thoughts were ringing in my mind. Suddenly, I fell silent, murmuring because I hadn't resisted Lau. And truthfully, I had never wanted to. My hands were, but I didn't pull away. When I saw the look in Leo's eyes, I knew there was nothing left to hide. I swallowed, took a deep breath, and slowly slid the straps of my clothes off my shoulders. You're right, Leo, I murmured in a barely audible, choked voice. Let's stop playing this game. Completely closing the distance between us, I lay back on the bed. My heart was pounding, but turning back was no longer an option. Lau slowly leaned over me. He looked me in the eyes for a moment, then smiled. Don't be afraid, he said in a reassuring voice. Everything's fine. I looked away. A shiver ran through me. Even if I couldn't admit it to myself, I knew how long I'd been waiting for this moment. Yet, I couldn't help saying something. Leo, I'm a little scared. Said, my breath irregular because of something important. Lau smiled and ignored what I was saying as if it pleased him. Maybe it was because he was drunk. Lau leaned gently towards my ear and said, George mustn't wake up. I understood what he meant, that there had to be silence. I don't know how, something. And I had to restrain myself from making a loud noise. Lau looked at me and said something like, I know, Agnes. Everything's fine, and you are too. What did he know? I think he guessed, and he understood me. I couldn't help it, and I closed my eyes. I gripped the sheets tightly with my hands, trembling uncontrollably. I covered my mouth with my hands to avoid making noise. Leo was so drunk, he didn't care about anything. In fact, even that touched me a lot. The excitement of the event combined with everything else and that irresistible major event. Elliot was drunk, tired, and out of breath. I said, Leo, you're red and we need to hurry. Leo said, Okay. He said, Okay. But he continued like that, and more and more. I had another contraction, and nothing else mattered. I wasn't even myself anymore. I closed my eyes and said, Do what you want, Leo. Do what you want. Leo must have appreciated it because he let himself go. He completely let himself go, and it was too much. The heat, the intensity was too much. I quickly laid Leo down in his bed and covered him up. Then I locked his bedroom door. I wanted to take a quiet shower and relax completely. I had no idea what was going to happen next, what had just happened. I thought about it in the shower, but at the same time I was nervous, uncomfortable. And yet the moment I got out, my mind was I was calm. I couldn't even blame myself because I was as relaxed as my mind. I got dressed in silence, went to bed, and fell asleep as if nothing had happened. But in truth, it was just a moment of excitement, a surge of irresistible desire. But nothing has ever been that simple. And it wouldn't stay simple either. It didn't stop there. It couldn't. Things would get more intense, and in the end, George was going to find out everything. This story isn't over. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss the continuation. Turn on notifications and leave a comment. This allows you to get a head start on these stories. Your support is essential.